Today, as we welcome new members into our community, and today as we honored with our chocolate or Starbucks or Werther's Original, are they as good as the hard candy ones, people who had them? No, yeah, I kind of figured, but I needed the bite thing, I'm sorry. Today we also acknowledge all of the ways that Unitarian Universalism and this church affirms and welcome families and all the ways that we have them, right? Now, I wanted to take some time to acknowledge and reclaim a little bit that I feel like the religious right has inappropriately claimed. And this is because in this month of love, I think it's important for us to think about not only the love that we are claiming as individuals, but that love that we are claiming in the world, because people need those declarations, right? And our communities need to know, and our children and our youth need to know all of the ways that love can exist and look like and flourish, right? So, the term family in my etymological digging, this is a thing preachers love to do, like what did this word actually mean? When we look up the word family, it actually says that it is from the 15th century English famille and Latin familia, both coming from a term that meant servants of a household. Right? This is actually a horrible root etymology for a word that means so much to so many. And the reality is that when we think about how family was used in this culture of the United States, we see that it is actually not far off from the power and the legal power that family held, right? Now, when we look at some laws and examples of this, we see that oftentimes family was used to keep in power white land-owning men, right? That was actually the legal construction of a lot of how we constituted the term family. So in Virginia, under slavery, masters had to approve of marriages of their slaves, and there are hardly any records of this, so it didn't really happen, right? White landowning men having the power to literally decree what is and isn't a family and choosing to not do that. And then we look later and we see this term called coverture, which comes from British law. And this was the rule of the land in the United States until beginning in 1839 in Mississippi and then continuing to be changed in other states. So coverture applies to women who were able to legally marry, which was typically white women. And the very being or legal existence of the woman, this law says, is suspended during the marriage and consolidated into the husband. So the husband controls all of the assets, and she is really unable to be financially independent of her husband. Now, just because we're in Virginia, we gotta say the other awful law that was on the books until 1967, when Loving versus Virginia made interracial marriages legal and allowed. There have been a lot of laws in our society that have not actually been about that warm, inclusive, expansive, loving understanding of family that we have, right? And I would actually argue that family values, which fascinatingly enough became a term that was first recorded in 1966, the year before Loving versus Virginia was passed in 1967, that this term family values was actually used to uphold this traditional understanding of what a family was and who it was supposed to protect and keep in power. Now, these are not our family values, right? I'm getting nods. These are not our family values, and words are so important. Words are so important, and if we want to go to the Bible, we're just going to go there for a second. We'll come right back. The gift that God gave humanity in Genesis was the gift to name, right? That is what differentiated us from other creatures, and still in this day and age, our use of language, how we name and call things, is one of our greatest powers. So this is why it's important for us to claim this word family and redefine it, right? It is our time to take control of this word and take out the abuse and control that was a part of how families were constructed for so long. Because here's what I know about Unitarian Universalists and families. We know that families can be both of blood and by choice. We know that what defines a family is love, is care, is all of those things that Patricia named, right? Sometimes a phone call, sometimes counsel, sometimes legal advice. It can come in so many different ways. And we honor the many different ways that people choose to live honestly and openly in the ways that are true and right for them, right? In ways that promote fullness of life, flourishing, and liberation. A family is our base, is our rock, is that love that will hold us and that will never let us go, that we can always fall back on, and that is always pushing us forward when we need that push. That is what family is to us. And it can look and be constructed in so many different ways, right? Amongst us, there are those who are single, who have family who they may or may not live with. There are those of us who are polyamorous and have families that might look or act differently than others. We have multi-generational families that may or may not be in the same roof. Adina talked about her grandmother living with them. We have mixed race families, we have blended families, we have LGBTQ families, we have families with folks of differing abilities and disabilities. We have more kinds of families with all sorts of words that we could use to describe them that I will not list fully here. But we know that here in this congregation, families are constructed and look in so many different ways, and that gives us both breadth and depth in our life and in our love. Now, as I was looking into this, because sometimes sermons take a different turn when you're doing research and reading stuff online, I wanted to think for a moment about laws that are still controlling the ways that people are able to be in family. Now, the one that first came to my mind, because I know this because of friends who are disabled who told me about this, is that it is often hard for people who are receiving certain governmental assistance because of disability to get married. And this is because when a disabled person who is receiving supplemental security income gets married, how much their spouse makes affects how much Social Security income they can get. And some of their spouse's income is now accounted for as going to them and will reduce their Social Security income and often just makes folks ineligible to receive it. Right? If both people in the marriage receive Social Security income, these payments will both decrease as the combined rate is not double what one person received, but about 1.5. That is abhorrent. I think we can all agree. And there are some moves to change this. So just last month, the state representative from California introduced in California a Marriage Equality for Disabled Adults Acts that he worked with a constituent of his who has disabilities with on. So my original call to action was going to be like, if they can do it in California, gosh darn it, we can do it here, right? And then I realized that part of what we do when we're trying to be in solidarity with other communities that are not our own is that we look at what these folks are asking for justice for. Like, what are disability justice groups in Virginia calling for? And I will tell you that I was shocked when I did some research and found a group called the ARC, which is the statewide disability advocacy organization for people with disabilities. And they have this public policy platform that they put out in 2019. And they said that Virginia ranked 39th among states in providing integrated service to people with disabilities. 39 is pretty bad for a state with some wealth, right? And in 2012, the US Department of Justice found, in fact, that the services in Virginia were so bad that they were in violation of the Americans with Disability Act. That's pretty bad. And since Virginia agreed to work on this in 2012, apparently the wait list for services has only doubled. So there is a lot to work on in Virginia, and maybe you are someone like me who is just learning about this, who is just having their eyes opened. And I think during COVID, a lot of us, because we increased access to our church, right? Because we became more accessible, have been learning more about what it is to have a disability in this culture. And we're trying to figure out what we can do both within this church and outside. And we have many leaders in this field, in this church. And there's a history dating back from Reverend Tim Kutzmark's time here for you all doing some of this work. We will hopefully have a guest speaker here in the next coming months as well, so there's time to do things. I don't like to bring up something and then be like, isn't this awful? What can we do about it, right? Right? We will be working on this together, and I couldn't not share this information when I was reading about how families and how laws are still preventing families from being together and from flourishing and from forming in the ways that they ought to be able to. So, part of why we talk about this is because we know that we can make changes within ourselves, and we have to, right? To open ourselves to loving in ways that we did not know we had blocks against. And we need to make changes in our church community and in our families. And we also need to make changes in society at large, right? This is what we are called to do as religious communities, is work on all of these levels, not all at the same time, but to work on all of these levels. Because as a church, we know that they all affect how we are able to live and grow and flourish. And we all deserve to flourish with that base bedrock of love that family and community can provide. So, my call to you today is when you go from this place, to go from the rooftop and be sharing how inclusive, expansive, and love-based our understanding of who and what family is, because there are far too many who do not know that that type of family that exists for support and love and liberation exists. Let us advocate so that all can have families however they like and live fully however they need and want. And let us claim a word and phrase that is so important to us and far too long has had some really awful definitions and understandings. Can I get an amen? Amen. May it be so, and may we make it so.